I was cleaning my bedroom when I heard the door creak behind me. It was late in the afternoon at the time. The moment I turned back, I noticed Liam standing in the doorway, peering intently at the object that I was holding. My heart came to a stop. Could you please clarify this to me? Not in any way innocent was the object in question. An enormous toy that is vividly colored. A topic that could not be ignored in any manner of communication. During the process of cleaning behind the cabinet, I had pulled it out of the drawer without giving it any thought. I was under the impression that I had locked the door. Ensure that you subscribe to my channel so that I can continue to provide you with entertaining genuine stories such as the one you are currently seeing. Additionally, make sure that you watch this video all the way through to the finish and give it a thumbs up because the narrative that is being told is going to be amazing. In order to demonstrate your support, kindly click the like button. My stepson Liam was 23 years old at the time. At this point, he was not meant to be at home. He worked at a brewery in the area, and after his shifts, he would typically hang out with his pals till late in the night. Then, however, there he was, tall and slender. As his dark hair fell into his blue eyes, he appeared to be amused. "Oh, what is that?" His question was asked with a tone that was halfway between inquisitive and playful. I felt a flush spread across my face. A throw pillow from the bed was the first thing I grabbed to hide the object after I dropped it as if it had scorched me. I dropped it as if it had burned me. I stuttered, my throat tightening as I reminded myself that it was none of your business. The expression on his face, however, did not shift. As he rested against the doorframe, his interest in the door continued to rise. With a sneer on his face, he continued, "You know, you don't have to act so embarrassed. There is no way that I have never witnessed something like that before." It seemed as if I were about to crawl into a hole. When my entire life was spinning out of control, the audacity of this man to stand there so carelessly and undisturbed that he was standing there. In an effort to divert attention away from myself, I produced a nervous laugh. "Seriously, Liam, you should just mind your own business. You have no business being in this room at all." Yet he did not move at all. The stillness that hung between us for a brief period was really weighty. He was no longer looking at the cushion, rather, he was looking at me. When compared to the typical fun glances, his stare appeared to be distinct, longer, and more intense. I had the impression that he had removed a layer of the person I believed I was and in its place discovered something completely different. An odd glimmer of warmth appeared deep within me, and then I was overcome with shame. This was not correct. His stepmother was one of me. It was his father who I was married to. To break the silence, I gave a slight shake of my head. "I beg you, Liam, to just leave." At long last, he gave a shrug and raised his hands in a false sign of surrender. He responded, okay, with a tone that was calm once more. On the other hand, before he left, he gave me one final look that caused my already unsettled thoughts to spin out of control. I was sitting on the side of the bed as the door shut behind him, and the pillow was still pressed to my chest. My heart was beating quite fast. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to put the toy back into the drawer where it had been stored. I had the impression that something unseen had changed between us, and despite my best efforts to ignore it, I was aware that I would never look at Liam in the same way again. That night, I was unable to shake the feeling that I was in. I made an effort to concentrate. During the time that Nathan was watching old westerns on television, I not only did laundry but also cooked dinner and sat next to him on the couch. In spite of this, I was tormented by Liam's face, his smirk, and the frightening glimmer in his eyes. Like he always does, Nathan hardly noticed that I was distracted. Since he retired, he had been completely engrossed in his hobbies, which included gardening, carpentry, and crossword puzzles. I did not harbor any resentment toward him for that. This would have been an overly simple task. On the other hand, there were times when I felt more like a live-in caretaker than a wife. At one point, I was able to see Liam's shadow moving about in his room since it was moving around. A low bass rhythm that sounded out of place in the otherwise calm house was the only thing I could hear in the background of the music that I could hear. As I shifted my focus back to Nathan, I felt a fluttering sensation in my chest for reasons that I was unable to articulate. Snoring softly, his chin was cocked downward. and he was sound asleep in his recliner, with the television still playing in the background. I considered rousing him, but I couldn't help but wonder what the point would be. Rather than that, I got up and made my way into the kitchen, thankful for the opportunity to spend some time by myself. But it didn't persist for very long. Upon entering, Liam's bare feet struck the hardwood floor with a gentle sensation. It appeared as though he had rubbed his hands through his hair. And he was dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt that had lost its color. "Greetings," he said in a nonchalant manner as he opened the refrigerator and took out a bottle of water. While I was attempting to keep the conversation light, I mentioned that you were up late. He smiled as he relaxed by resting against the counter and just taking it easy. Living in this location might be challenging at times. The remark caused me to feel a halt. "May I ask what you mean?" Although he appeared to be shrugging, there was a serious expression written all over his face. "Simply relocating to this location is not a big deal. My gut tells me that I no longer feel like I belong here." I became more lenient. I couldn't help but feel a little bit of maternal concern despite everything that was going on. "Just a short-term situation. Liam, you will figure out what's going on. You have a lot of intelligence also. You will come to rest on your feet." "Thank you, Sophia," he added, his tone becoming more subdued. "For that, I am grateful." We remained there in quiet for a brief period of time, the kitchen appearing to get more cramped as the distance between us shrunk. At the same time that he did not look away, I experienced the same peculiar warmth in my chest. After clearing my throat, I distracted myself by scrubbing the counter in an effort to alleviate the tension that was building up. Still, Liam was not finished. Regarding previously, he stated, his tone being lighthearted, "Once more, there is no need for you to be humiliated. Aren't we all human beings? As far as you know?" I was attempting to maintain my cool as I turned to him and my hand became frozen. "All right, Liam, let's not bring up that topic. Shall we? Because it was an accident. It is not something that should be brought up again." In a gesture of submission, he raised his hands and muttered, "Okay." Despite this, there was still a hint of menacing in his smile, which caused my stomach to turn over. The distance between us was close enough that I could detect the scent of his perfume. Despite the fact that I did not turn back, I was aware of his presence behind me before he completed his exit from the kitchen. On that particular evening, when I was lying in bed next to Nathan, I was unable to stop thinking about the events that had transpired. What was I engaging in? My ability to maintain clear boundaries, lines that were not intended to be crossed, had always been a strength of mine. However, Liam had a habit of blurring such distinctions without really making an effort to do so. And what was even worse was that I wasn't entirely certain that I wanted him to stop. I made an effort to behave normally the following morning. As is my custom, I prepared breakfast for myself. Nathan is going to have eggs, toast, and coffee, a smoothie with only me in it. After a shower, Liam was the last person to enter the kitchen, and his hair was still wet from the experience. It was a casual morning greeting that he gave to Nathan, and he gave me a warm smile that caused my heart rate to quicken. We were seated at the table, and the air was filled with the sound of clinking silverware and fragments of conversation passing between us. But beneath it all, I could sense the tension that was building up. When Liam's hand approached mine while he was passing the salt or refilling the coffee, I had the impression that it was done on purpose. On multiple occasions, I was able to observe him fixedly observing me, his gaze remaining unreadable. Naturally, Nathan did not observe anything at all. Following breakfast, Liam made the offer to assist me in cleaning up. The fact that he made the offer took me by surprise because, in a normal situation, he would have gone to his room or gone out with his friends. While I was stacking plates in the sink, "I told you that you didn't have to." His response was, "I want to," and he immediately grabbed a dish rag. We were working in solitude for a time. The atmosphere seemed to be heated. We came into contact with one another's hands at one point as I reached for a drink at the same time that he did. Neither one of us moved farther away. He whispered, "You are not like other people." His talk was scarcely audible above a whisper. My throat was dry as I questioned, "What do you mean by that?" He paused, looking back at me with his gaze. "To put it simply, you should not behave in the same manner as other ladies your age." With a nervous laugh, I took a few steps back to make some space for myself. To be honest, I find that to be quite flattering. In addition to that, he went on to point out, you are genuine. Actually, you pay attention. People are visible to you. The earnestness that he expressed in his speech caught me off guard. Having no idea what to say, I went back to doing the dishes because I was clueless. Nevertheless, while I scrubbed, I became aware of his presence once more close behind me. My chest tightened, and I detested the fact that I wanted him to remain in that location. Even before I had a chance to collect my thoughts, I heard Nathan's voice coming from the living room. Sophia, where is my book of crossword puzzles? As the moment came to an end, Liam took a step back and smiled at me in a way that indicated he understood. The tone of his voice was light as he walked away, and he continued, I'll let you get back to him later. A mixture of comfort and yearning flooded over me. Even though I was aware that I was playing with fire, there was a part of me that couldn't help but grab for the heat. During that afternoon, I made sure to keep myself occupied by doing errands in an effort to prevent myself from thinking about all that had occurred. On the other hand, when I got back to my house, I discovered Liam sitting on the steps of the porch, gazing off into the backyard, a far cry from the self-assured young guy the first typically saw. He appeared to be deeply absorbed in his own thoughts. Hey, I whispered as I got closer to the person. With a small smile, he looked up at the sky. Hey, is everything all right? I questioned him while I was seated next to him, maintaining a certain space but being close enough to feel his warmth. He paused for a moment before responding. Yes, I'm simply thinking about life, where I'm going, and what I ought to be doing on this particular day. I was unable to suppress the feeling of pity that I had. Liam, you are still young. It is not necessary for you to have everything sorted out. Although his eyes were riveted on the yard, he gazed at me. After that, he continued by asking, do you ever get the feeling that you're destined for something different, after a lengthy pause? As if you were unable to escape the erroneous narrative? His remarks had a more profound impact on me than I was willing to accept. It was my intention to reassure him that everything would be fine. In point of fact, however, I was not certain that it would be. Instead, I softly squeezed his shoulder with my palm and placed it on his shoulder. Although I was hoping that he wouldn't notice the trembling in my voice, I told him that you are not stuck. A little period passed in which his palm touched mine, and the seemingly insignificant gesture felt more personal than I would have liked to acknowledge. Despite my immediate efforts to remove my hand, the damage had already been done. A further border was breached, and I was uncertain whether or not I possessed the strength to stop it. As the evening progressed, the sky became darker, which pointed to the impending arrival of a storm. The air was thick, and it felt as though the entire world was waiting for something to take place. In order to alleviate the pain in his shoulder, Nathan went to bed earlier than usual. I tried to concentrate on the book I was reading as I was sitting in the living room. In the same way that I felt restless on the inside, the storm outside matched that. Something that's difficult to predict and perhaps harmful. It was possible for me to hear Liam in the kitchen, the refrigerator opening and closing, and then the gentle sound of glass being clinked. It was only a few moments later when he made his appearance in the doorway. Holding 2 glasses. Whiskey? He inquired, arching an eyebrow in response. I was taken aback and blinked my eyes. For the most part, I don't drink at this hour. That is possible. He smiled and handed me a glass without waiting for an answer before saying, tonight is an exception. It was an exception. Although I was hesitant, I decided to take it. As Liam dropped into the armchair opposite from me, the cool glass I was holding felt substantial in my hand, which helped me feel more grounded. The light from the lamp that was next to me shed a warm glow across his face, drawing attention to the distinct contours of his jaw and the understated outline of his stubble. Do you have anything to read? He questioned while pointing to the book that was sitting on my lap. I said, just something light, while momentarily holding it up in front of me. Nothing that excites me. He gave a smirk. It is difficult for me to believe that. While I was taking a sip of the whiskey, I let out a gentle laugh. As the tension in the room continued to rise, the burn served as a welcome opportunity for distraction. For a while, we sat in silence as the storm that was occurring outside grew more intense. But then Liam spoke once more, this time with a hushed voice. What is it that I need to ask you? When I looked at him, I was suspicious. It could depend on what it is. He had his eyes locked on the liquid in his glass as he swirled it about, as if he was trying to collect his thoughts. Feel like you're trapped in a rut? He surprised me with his question. There was a distinct difference in the weight of it, despite the fact that it was so identical to the one he had asked earlier on the porch. Occasionally, I conceded. My voice was softer than I intended it to be. The gaze of Liam was directed upwards, and his eyes met mine. You do not appear to be the kind of person who ought to be confined. That is not something you should do. As my cheeks began to blush, I diverted my gaze away from the situation and placed my glass on the coffee table. Things like those are not appropriate for you to say. Liam, not at all? Indeed, such is the case. The words he spoke lingered in the air, laden with meaning that was not spoken. The sudden need for some space prompted me to stand up. Trying to avert his sight, I announced that I believed it was time for us to call it a night. In spite of this, the lights began to flicker and the power suddenly went out just as I was about to leave. I was thrown off by the sudden darkness, and I stopped in the middle of my step. Oh, I mumbled, my voice faltering slightly. As calm as ever, Liam explained that it was simply the storm. Wait here, I'll go and look for a torch. I could hear him getting closer, and I could hear the faint rustle of his garments as they passed me. Then, in the darkness, his hand lightly touched mine, and I took a deep breath in response to the sensation. He mumbled his apology, but he did not move away from the area, at the same time that his hand remained warm and steady against mine. The air that was between us appeared to change. Nothing could move me. I could feel my heart beating, and I had the impression that he could also hear it. His voice was barely heard as he whispered these words to Sophia. The darkness prevented me from seeing him, but I was able to sense his presence, his warmth, and his breath. I turned toward him despite the fact that I couldn't see him. It was then that his hand moved up to my wrist and softly held it there. I repeated it with a quivering voice. This is a terrible idea. Although he responded, I know, his grasp did not loosen slightly. In that instant, the room was briefly illuminated by the first crack of lightning, and it was then that I caught a glimpse of his face, which was vulnerable, near, and impossibly earnest. After that, he gave me a kiss. The kiss was gentle and tentative at first, almost as though he was waiting for me to move away from him. Still, I did not. Despite the fact that the world was spinning out of control, I leaned into him and gripped his shirt with my hands as if he were the only thing that was stable. At the moment that the lights began to flicker back on, we separated ourselves, both of us taking deep breaths. My hands began to shake as I took a few steps back as the realization of what we had just accomplished washed over me like a wave. My head was trembling as I said, "This is not going to happen." Liam did not fight back. It was impossible to read his face as he simply stood there. He stated, "I know," while maintaining a calm tone. But the harm had already been done. In the days that followed, there was a haze of stolen glances and words that were not spoken. To keep my mind occupied, I did everything I could to avoid Liam. I threw myself into housework and errands, and I did anything else that I could think of. However, despite my best efforts, I was unable to forget the sensation of his lips on mine or the way his hand had lingered on my wrist. I was unable to forget either of these things. When I was folding laundry in the guest room one evening, Liam came at the doorway. I was surprised to see him there. "It is imperative that we have a conversation," he stated with a stern tone. I did not raise my head. At this point, there is nothing to discuss. His response was, "Yes, there is," and he entered the room before locking the door behind him. I heaved a sigh as I put the laundry down and looked directly into his eyes. "No matter what it is, Liam, this must come to an end. It's all wrong. Is it the case?" He posed the question with a demanding tone. "Because I don't get the impression that it's wrong." His remarks caused a chill to run down my spine, but I made a conscious effort to maintain my composure. "I don't think you comprehend. If Nathan ever discovered the truth, this is not the case," Liam remarked. "Also, even if he did, do you really believe that he would care about it? Even now, he pays you hardly any attention." Although his comments hurt, I was unable to ignore the truth that they contained. I have to quit doing this. As my voice became louder, I stated that this was not about him. This pertains to us. No matter what this is, it is not going to take place. No, it's not only incorrect, it's not even conceivable. Liam moved closer to me, his gaze fixed on mine as he did so. How come? Since you are concerned about what other people will think of you? Due to the fact that you are concerned about what you could think? Although I opened my mouth to respond, I was unable to produce any words. What I did not say was sufficient. He continued in a hushed voice. Sophie, it is not my intention to make things more difficult for you. But I can't fool myself into thinking that I don't have feelings for you. I don't believe that you are able to either. The tears began to well up in my eyes, and I averted my gaze. I hushed you, saying that you do not comprehend. He then pleaded with me to explain it to me, and his voice was begging. I, however, was unable to explain it. I had no words to express the feelings of shame, anxiety, and longing that I was experiencing. After that, I gave him a shake of the head and pushed by him, leaving the room without uttering a single word. I was unable to get to sleep that night. While I was lying there in bed, I was staring at the ceiling and listening to the gentle hum of Nathan's regular breathing. When I tried to make sense of the feelings that were swirling around in my head, I was unable to do so. My worries were getting the better of me, so I got up and went to the kitchen in the hopes that a glass of water would help me relax. When I entered the hallway, however, I couldn't move at all. It appeared as though Liam had been waiting for me despite the fact that his door was open and he was standing there with his back against the doorframe. I'm having trouble sleeping, he asked in a low voice. While I was at a loss for words, I simply nodded. The quiet that hung between us was thick, and for a long moment, we did nothing except stare at each other. Afterward, I turned around and walked back to my room, closing the door behind me. I did this without giving it any thought. Although I was lying down again, I was aware that this was not yet ended, in spite of the fact that it was impossible and harmful. Whatever it was that was between us, it not going away, and I was not really certain that I wanted it to happen. The subsequent time it occurred, there was neither a storm to blame nor a flickering light to conceal oneself while it occurred. On this occasion, it was done on purpose. The laundry room, of all places, was where it all seemed to begin. In the process of pulling warm towels out of the dryer, I found that the consistent rhythm of folding them provided me with some kind of escape. The house was devoid of din. During the time that Nathan was at a friend's house watching a game, I was under the impression that I had the entire place to myself. After that, I became aware of the gentle groaning sound that the floorboards made behind me. I couldn't quite locate the tone of Liam's voice, but his voice was light and his tone was light. You're always working, he added. I did not make a turnabout, I said, all the while attempting to maintain a neutral tone. Someone has to. He laughed in a low voice. What you say is correct. But don't you sometimes grow sick of hearing it? What are you tired of? Although I was perplexed, I inquired, ensuring that everything is managed and that everyone is taken care of. Are you able to recall the last time someone looked out for you? The words he spoke pierced me like a very sharp razor. After that, I turned around while holding a folded towel to my chest as if it were a shield. I don't believe that this is the kind of talk that we ought to be having. Liam, not at all? He inquired while propped up against the doorframe in a nonchalant manner. Although he appeared to be in a relaxed state, his eyes were sharp and scanning me with a level of intensity that was not typical for him. For the reason that, as I stated with a trembling voice, it is not suitable. Suitable, he repeated, as if he were putting the word to the test. Nevertheless, that is not the same thing as being honest. Is it? I had the need to dispute with him, to silence him before he could say anything else that would make the situation even more difficult. However, before I could do so, he moved closer to me, so reducing the distance that separated us. His voice was quiet as he whispered to Sophia, "You don't have to pretend with me. There you are. It is clear that you are able to carry this house. What it is that you do to keep things together while everyone else just takes it. Are you not of the opinion that you should have something for yourself?" As I stepped back till I touched the edge of the counter behind me, my throat clenched, and I shook my head. I went back to my previous position. It is imperative that this, whatever it may be stopped. Liam, as he extended his hand. It came close to making contact with mine. Despite the fact that it was such a little and understated action, I had the impression that the ground beneath me was moving. In a tone that was barely audible above a whisper, he murmured, "Tell me you don't feel it, too." Although I opened my mouth to respond, I was unable to produce any words. I was unable to tell him a lie. I was unable to tell a lie to it. After that, he kissed me, just like he had done the previous evening in the living room. I did not attempt to stop him this time. Following that, the days that followed were a haze of snatched moments and secrets that were spoken. We took precautions, or at least we wanted to believe that we were. Liam was quite good at finding reasons to stay with me, such as, for example, offering to assist with dinner preparation, repairing a cabinet door that was broken, and even volunteering to run errands with me. In the beginning, it was exciting because of the rush of something that was illegal. Nevertheless, the fact that it was true weighed heavily on me. I had a feeling that it wouldn't last. Everything was going to come crashing down at some point, and it was only a matter of time. During the course of one afternoon, as I was putting away groceries, Liam approached me from behind and wrapped his arms around my waist tightly. I became rigid and glanced in the direction of the entrance to ensure that there was no one present. "It's Liam." While attempting to get away, I hissed. At any moment, Nathan might choose to stroll in. He stated in a calm manner that Nathan was in the hardware store. "Take it easy." But I was unable to wind down. Not any longer. I was beginning to crumble under the weight of the paranoia. I was always curious about Nathan's knowledge whenever he glanced at me. Every time Claire, our nosy neighbor, waved at me from across the street, I had the impression that she could see right through me. I turned to face Liam and said, "We need to talk about what that is." His expression was unreadable as he asked the question. "With regard to this is about us." The muscles in his jaw tightened, and I saw for the first time that he had a trace of wrath in his eyes. "Let's talk about us." I struggled to get the words out. But I said, "This has to stop. It's not worth the risk. Nathan will not be treated fairly." As he repeated, his voice became more elevated. "Fair to Nathan? Exactly what do you mean by fair? Can you even hear what you're saying? When you are so preoccupied with thinking about him, you don't even give any thought to what it is that you desire." I snapped. "It doesn't matter what it is that I want. It is not about me at all." In response, he asked Sophia, "You have earned the right to experience joy. You are deserving of being with someone who is able to view you properly." The utterances lingered in the wind, with a heavy burden. The truth, I had the want to quarrel with him in order to show him that he was incorrect. But I was unable to. Simply because I had a gut feeling that he was correct. After a few weeks had passed, the breaking point occurred. The dinner invitation was extended by Nathan to Claire and her husband. And I was doing everything in my power to be the ideal hostess on that particular occasion. On the other hand, Claire's piercing eyes appeared to be fixed on me during the entire night. In addition, I was unable to shake the impression that she was aware of something. Following the meal, while I was cleaning up in the kitchen, Claire surrounded me and confronted me. She stated it in a casual tone. "But her eyes were looking into your mind. You've been awfully distracted lately," she remarked. In response, I feigned a smile and said, "Just busy. It is not a secret to you." She lowered her voice and leaned in slightly from the side. "Is Nathan aware of this?" My heart was racing in my chest as I could not move. I responded with a, "No." My voice barely audible. Claire gave a shrug, her expression being indecipherable. "What is going on between you and Liam at this moment?" I had the sensation that the ground had been abruptly removed from beneath me. My voice was shaking as I voiced my disbelief that I had no idea what you were talking about. At the same time, Claire smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Take care, Sophia, just this once. There is a way that secrets can be revealed." I was unable to stop thinking about Claire's words as I laid in bed that night. I couldn't quit thinking about them. When I was caught between two realities that couldn't cohabit, I felt like I was caged. When Liam arrived the following morning, he saw me in the garden, plucking weeds with more vigor than was required. Despite the fact that his tone was calm, he expressed his irritation by saying, "You are avoiding me." While I was responding, I did not look up. I was attempting to protect us. As he moved closer, he questioned. What about protecting us from what? As I stood there and wiped my hands on my jeans, I replied due to the fact that this was blowing up in our faces. He is aware of it. With a frown, his demeanor became more serious. She had no way of knowing. The volume of my voice increased as I continued. I don't know, but she does. What if she were to inform Nathan? Nathan will not, he stated in a forceful tone. I snapped at you because you are unaware of that. You are completely oblivious to the gravity of the situation. Without causing any discomfort, Liam took hold of my hand and held it firmly. It has been brought to my attention that I desire to avoid losing you. It was the unfiltered intensity in his voice that took me by surprise. For a little period of time, I was at a loss for words. By the time I finished speaking, my voice was barely above a whisper. You won't, I said. However, we must exercise caution for the benefit of both of us. The subsequent days were fraught with tension. To the best of my knowledge, Claire did not communicate with Nathan in any way on any occasion. On the other hand, the magnitude of her distrust loomed over me like a fog. Liam made an effort to instill confidence in me, but even he appeared to be more anxious than normal. Then, Nathan arrived home earlier than he had anticipated on a certain evening. When I heard the front door open, I was in the laundry room with Liam, and the two of us were standing closer to one another than we should have been. Like a group of remorseful adolescents, we broke apart. Nathan called out to Sophia, and his voice reverberated throughout the entire house. In this room, I responded, maintaining a steady tone of voice despite the mounting anxiety in my chest. Nathan made his appearance in the doorway, his gaze traveling around the entire room. At first, I was under the impression that he was going to make a statement. But then he simply nodded my head. I hastily inquired about the readiness of dinner in an effort to divert the subject. Then I added, almost, without saying a single word. He departed. However, the look that he gave me appeared in my mind long after he had left. I was unable to get to sleep that night. I couldn't stop thinking about the time I spent in the laundry room. Nathan's gaze had remained on me for a fraction of a second longer than normal. The sensation I had was that I was perched precariously on the precipice of a cliff. And it was only a matter of time before everything came tumbling down around me. Nevertheless, in spite of everything, I was unable to bring myself to put a stop to it. Whatever it was that was going on between Liam and me, it felt like it was too big and too heavy for me to just walk away from it. On the other hand, I was aware that the storm was not yet over. A new beginning has just begun. It began with Nathan arriving home earlier than planned. But this time, it wasn't simply the timing that threw me off guard, it was also the unexpected circumstances. The expression on his face was unreadable as he entered the home and placed his briefcase down with a purposeful thud. His face was tense and his expression was unreadable. It's Liam. When I answered the phone, Nathan's voice was so harsh that it made my stomach plummet. Moments later, Liam made his appearance in the corridor, his laid-back demeanor standing in stark contrast to the obvious stress that Nathan was experiencing. What's going on? As he leaned against the wall with his hands tucked into his pockets, he requested. Nathan's eyes became more narrow. We need to have a conversation. Given the tone of his voice, there was no space for debate at this point. Prior to following Nathan into the living room, Liam gave me a fleeting glance, a look of concern appearing in his eyes from time to time. With my heart hammering, I stood there in the kitchen, completely still. At first, I was only able to hear the low rumbling of Nathan's voice and the occasional lower comments from Liam. I was unable to actually understand what they were saying. However, as the intensity of their conversation increased, things became more evident. I am aware of a number of recent events. Nathan uttered the words, his tone as icy as ice. What exactly are you referring to then? In his response, Liam maintained a steady but guarded tone. Nathan yelled at the other kid, don't try to fool me. She looks at you in the same manner that you look at her. And I've seen both of them. Think I'm unable to see things? My body went into a coma. Because he knew, or at the very least had sufficient suspicions. He confronted Liam. Liam addressed Nathan and said, you are imagining things. His tone was more steady than I had anticipated it could be. Nothing is happening at this time. Nathan yelled out in a firm voice. Don't lie to me. Immediately after that, there was a sound of something cracking. Possibly a glass was no longer able to conceal themselves. Despite the fact that my hands were shaking, I entered the doorway. I yelled at Nathan to make a stop. Both males shifted their attention to me, their facial expressions being diametrically opposed to one another. The expression on Nathan's face was a combination of wrath and betrayal, whilst the expression on Liam's face was more similar to defiance. Nathan addressed Sophia in a tone that was more subdued but not any less menacing. Please be honest with me. Do you and your partner have a relationship that is going on? My mouth was open, but I was unable to produce any words. My silence was the response I gave. Nathan chuckled cruelly as he ran his hand through his hair, which was beginning to thin. Through a quiver in his voice, he stated, I knew it, although I didn't want to believe it. I was aware of it. As I moved closer to Nathan, I pleaded with him from a distance. Don't, he yelled to me while extending his hand. In addition, you shouldn't even attempt to explain it. You are unable to say anything that will make this situation acceptable. The only thing that cut through the eerie silence that had descended upon the room was the sound of the clock ticking. With his eyes blazing, Nathan finally shifted his attention to Liam. Nathan stated in a chilly tone, You're out. Put your belongings in order. And depart tonight. As Liam maintained his position, his jaw became more tense. Nothing is going to happen to me. In response, Nathan stated, Yes, you are. Not only are you not staying under my home, but you are also showing me such contempt. Liam addressed you in a tone that was low but authoritative, saying, I think you should calm down. It just served to make Nathan more enraged. He moved closer to Liam as he passed, with fists clenched. Please don't tell me to pull myself together. You little. While I was in the middle of them, I yelled out, Stop it. Put an end to it. Both of you. Nathan turned to face me, the pain on his face visible in his eyes. Why would you do that? Sophia? He inquired, his voice cracking slightly. In light of everything that I have done for you. My words were, I didn't intend for this to take place. Streams of tears running down my head. I never intended to cause you any harm. Nathan remarked with a sour tone. Well, you did. In addition to this, I am now forced to confront the reality that my own wife and my son. He shook his head and began to stutter further. I am unable to even put it into words. Despite Liam's attempt to take my hand, I resisted his grasp. His touch was too much for me to bear. At the very least, not at this time. No, not when Nathan is looking on. A calm voice said, I believe it would be best if I left. Nathan fixed his gaze on me, his expression deepening. He stated in a stern tone that you are not going anywhere. My home is located here. He is the one who is departing. If anyone is, who is Nathan? It was I who started. But he interrupted me. He responded with a negative. I do not wish to be exposed to it. Sophia, you have already made your decision. You are going to have to deal with the repercussions of your actions now. In the evening, Liam departed. He did not utter a single word while he packed a bag, his movements being stiff and mechanical. Despite the fact that my heart was breaking with each step, I followed him to the driveway. I'm sorry, I mumbled to myself, streams of tears running down my head. His expression was smoother than I had anticipated when he turned to face me. With a steady tone, he stated that this was not yet over. You are aware of that, right? I gave a slight nod, but I maintained my silence, because I was unsure whether or not what he said was true. Despite the fact that I wanted to believe him, as his car drove away down the street, I experienced a pain that was located deep within my chest. I felt a mixture of remorse, loss, and something else that I couldn't quite put my finger on. The days that followed passed in an intolerable manner. There was hardly any communication between us. Nathan's silence was more retributive than any words could have been. To keep myself occupied, I dove headfirst into chores around the house, yet nothing was able to divert my attention away from the void that I was experiencing. Next, the letter arrived 1 week after it was sent. It was Liam who sent it. The only thing that was written in his signature handwriting was my name. And there was no return address. While unfolding the paper, my hands were shaking and my pulse was racing. I opened it with shaky hands. This is how the letter started. Sophia, In spite of the fact that I am aware that the situation is now tricky. I want you to know that I meant what I said. This is not concluded. To me, it makes no difference what other people believe or say. I can't just leave you behind and go away. I won't do that. I'll be here for you whenever you're set to go. At all times. Even though my hands were shaking. I read the letter 3 times. A portion of me desired to rip it to shreds, to set fire to it, and to act as if it had never been. However, there was another part of me that held to his words like a lifeline. This was a portion that I did not want to confess to myself. I tucked the letter away in the back of the drawer on my dresser while I was sleeping that night. I was keeping it a secret from the rest of the world because I wasn't ready to reveal it to them. Since I was aware, on some level, that Liam was correct. This was not over by any stretch of the imagination.